Hello. What is up, friends? I'm back. I am back. Hopefully you guys are back as well. So, what are we going to do now? Well, right now, I want you guys to ask questions, and I will give you answers. Feel free to ask any kind of question you like, and I'll try to answer it as best as I humanly can. Mm-hmm. Oh, dude. I feel pretty good this morning. I even had my fruit smoothie. Especially when I have my fruit smoothie. I feel even better. So right now I'm making a brush for anyone who's curious. I'm making a brush, and with this brush, I'm going to try out some stuff. Oh, you know what I need to do? Let's try this. Let's put some airiness to this brush. See if this helps. Okay, let's make it. All right. Yep, as I anticipated. Okay. And then put some transfer on this, but not a lot. Let's do 15. Shape dynamics. Let's put some pen pressure on there. Let's do 25. No angle jitter. Let's put some flow. Jitter, but not a lot. Hey, did Last Guardian come out, by the way? Is that game out? For whatever reason, it just hit me. Like, that game's out, isn't it? Is it? Last Guardian. Oh, it's getting pretty good reviews. Initial release date, December 6th. Since it's out. It's out. Oh, I guess I'll buy it tomorrow.
Looks awesome.
Yeah, I was like, I've been waiting for that game for so long, I just forgot. And then they're like, hey, it's coming out pretty soon. I'm like, oh, awesome. And I just totally forgot. Like Rogue 1 is out too. I found out this morning. I was like, what? When has Rogue 1 been out? And I've been hearing it's pretty good. People like it. And so I'm going to probably watch it this weekend. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Did you play Shadow of the Colossus?
Of
I
course.
think he's the guy who made The Last Guardian.
Yeah, it's the same team. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, you can see the connection.
Yeah, it's the same
Great.
universe. Like Ico, Shadow Colossus, and then now the Last Guardian. It's like the same kind of world, I believe. Or they're interconnected somehow.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway.
So I have a pretty specific question. Um, like, uh, how consciously do you think about light when you're drawing? Because it seems like you can draw something which looks pretty realistically, really fast, and I'm wondering, are you actually thinking about the direction of the light and the angle of each surface which is being hit, or is that something that is already unconscious and you don't have to think about it?
I don't really have to think about it too much, no. But let me explain what makes things look realistic. It actually has nothing to do with lighting. Lighting helps for sure. And actually, it's all about the shape. Shape is what makes things look realistic. Okay, I'll explain in just a second. Lighting plays a huge part, though. It's not like it doesn't take a back seat to it necessarily, but it's a big deal. So I learned this when I was looking at one of my favorite artists, Jeremy Geddes. So I was studying his artwork, especially in the very, very beginning of my career. I was practicing a lot, and I found this image once, right? And before I was distracted by like images like this, or the images like this even, right? Really beautifully painted. Wow, I can start to
Yeah, it
see.
looks photorealistic.
Wait. I can start to see the imperfections. Am I getting closer? I could like Um, that's a good indication because for the last decade, literally, I can never see the imperfections, right? And there's a very few artists that do that for me. And Jeremy Geddes is one of those people, and quite a few others. But there's other artists that I started seeing the imperfections very clearly as I got better and better. Now, did that mean that I stopped liking their work or hated them all of a sudden? No, of course I still am inspired and really inspired by a lot of their work, right? But it just became very clear to me the kinds of things that they can do to improve if they ever chose to. And I use that word very clearly, choose to. I believe that if you feel happy and content with your style and your approach, there's nothing wrong with that. There's this sense that you should always be growing, you should always be learning kind of attitude. No, you don't have to if you don't want to. You know, there's many other things in the world to try to be excited about. Like you don't have to always just try to keep chasing the thing. And I think if you just keep doing the thing anyways, you're just going to get mastery just by the sheer practice of it, right? Um, So yeah, like for me, it's not a big deal. If people feel like they're good where they're at, uh, it's a different story if they complain about other people. I see this all the time. Some of my favorite artists I loved and admire complain like fucking all the time about like the industry, like oh the industry's changing, and they're like hermits or curmudgeons, and that's kind of disappointing because I'm like, dude, you understand that the industry is just always going to be changing. Like this is just how it is. This is just life, you know? To complain about
Yeah.
something that's changing is like complaining about the sky being blue, and it's gonna always it's just how it is, you know. Today people are complaining about 3D and photo bashing. Tomorrow they're going to be complaining about VR design and art, right? Because someone who doesn't want to adopt the new technology. It's just how it is. James Cameron's one of my favorite role models for this because he's like he was asked like what your favorite technology was because he uses all kinds of technology. He puts like cameras in space and stuff like that. And then he's asked what his favorite technology was, and he was like, oh, paper and pencil, because there's nothing that gets an idea faster than paper pencil, right? And then when you ask him like what's better, film or digital when filming a movie, like real film or digital, he said digital because you have more control. He's like it's clearly better. Like I have like he's like my other co-director or directors out there, my colleagues feel differently about this, but they're wrong. He's like, they're just wrong. Because before film there was a different medium, and then people used to rave and scream about different like, and then before that there was different formats, and people used to scream and holler about the different formats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, and so to kind of get off topic, to stop being off topic for a second, I'm just starting to when I can start seeing the weakness, that's a huge win. It's not a big one either, actually. He's still 100 miles away from me. But anyway, um, so getting to the point. So I used to look at these images and get distracted by this and be like, man, what? Like the lighting, the anatomy, and all that stuff, which is which all helps make the image look more believable. Okay, but when I
Yeah.
saw this image, that's when I realized that it really is all about shapes. Because even though there's soft blending between the flesh and what have you, right? That soft blend is just a transition between two and three different shapes. You understand? And when you
Yeah.
look at the dress, this is really where it hit me. Look at the dress. The dress has no
Yeah, it's
lighting to
super
it.
graphic.
Yeah, it's very graphic, right? It's pretty much just black. There is no lighting at all, right? But it,
Yeah.
it is lit. It just happens to be like a very matte material, like a velvet or some sort, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so how does he convey realism if he can't put lighting in this? Well, with the shape. Look at the wrinkles, right? And look at the shoulder to when it goes into the the radial brachialis, I believe that is, right? And like into the ulna, you know? Like he knew where to put those wrinkles and dips. You understand?
It's very subtle.
Yeah, it's very certain. Exactly. And it's very,
And subtle, I meant.
a what?
Like the difference is
Subtle.
subtle.
Oh, subtle.
Subtle.
Yeah, it's subtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that too. It's very certain and it's very subtle. And so, when you start to look at just silhouettes of images, like just silhouettes of people, what have you, right? So like for instance, let me see if I can find. So when you see a silhouette of this, right? It's pretty clearly not very realistic. I mean, it's pretty believable, but it's not entirely realistic. Okay? Right? Like, or even like look at these silhouettes, right? But then when we look at a silhouette that is more believable, let's see if I can find. Like this is pretty good. This is obviously a photo. Well, why is it obviously a photo? Aside from the lighting, like why does this person feel like a real person? You know? And this is just on the outside. These are like the outside shapes, right? But it's the same on the inside too. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of my favorite painters too, Sean Cheatham. It's a self-portrait of himself. Same thing. Like he just, if you ever watch him paint, he blocks out the shapes. First, he blocks out the shape of the head or the background versus the head. Then he blocks out the shape of where the shadows belong. And then he blocks out the shape of the midtones. And then he just keeps building upon that until eventually it's blended all together and it looks pretty realistic. You understand?
Yeah, I don't entirely understand how they do it. I mean, I guess it's lots of practice, and
What I'm
I
trying to
mean that's
tell
what I
you is
meant.
that what I'm trying to tell you is that like you're saying lighting, but I'm telling you
Mm-hmm.
you already know how to do lighting. You might not think you do, but you absolutely do. You know how I know? Hold on just a second. Just a little too. Okay. This is a cube, right? This is letter A. This is B. This is C. Okay?
Right?
Here's a light source coming from this angle. Which side is lit?
A is gonna be probably the most late of the three.
Yep, right. Nailed it. Okay, so here's another light source. We'll call this 2. Light source 1 and 2. So what is light source 2 doing?
It's sliding side B the most.
Yep,
Yeah,
you're right.
that's that's the most basic. But do you think about this when painting, or
No,
I mean
I'm
it's
trying to just
yeah.
wait a second. Just don't interrupt. Just pay attention to this.
Okay, sorry, sorry.
So which sides do you think are lit here?
Looks like A or C, maybe in between.
Yeah, maybe both, right?
Maybe the, maybe both.
So here's the thing. I just proved to you, you know how lighting works. Okay? So then what's the
Yeah.
problem? Why can't you quote unquote light things accurately? It's because you don't understand the forms in which you are lighting. That's the problem. So I see this commonly. So you just proven to me that you understand lighting, right? And I've just kind of demonstrated that, right? Oops.
Right.
So here's what I see happening. So light number 1, right? You said the light's mostly A, but sometimes what I see is this: people lighting like that. Is that accurate?
I don't think so.
No, right? And why not? It's because you're not lighting it, you're tracing the shape. Okay, because this will be more accurate, right? Like obviously, right? And perhaps this would be not as bright, but it would have some brightness to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then C would probably be mostly in shadow. That looks pretty accurate, right? Look how badass of a painter I am. But like, look,
Awesome.
it's just shapes. It's the light shape versus the shadow shape. That's literally it, right? But how do we find those shapes? Well, we have to know what forms we're painting. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever people have a hard time with, again, quote unquote, lighting, I say, no, it's not lighting that you have a problem with. It's your forms. You don't know what forms you're painting. So you're painting a character, you have like a character head and design, whatever, and then you're like, you put all the features in, which is great, but then you do what I just said. You just kind of just paint without even thinking about the actual lighting. So like if you're saying the light is coming from here, right? Like people will do this, and then they'll start lighting this, and then start doing this, and they'll start lighting this for no reason, and then this. They start putting lighting everywhere, right? When it's just as simple as, well, what is the shape that's going to be designed or created from the forms that I have here, right? So if you were just to draw the shape of the light and thinking of only the forms as your guiding force, and then just filling in that shape, you see kind of the power of that?
Mm-hmm. So trying to simplify and be as accurate as you can on a more simplified level.
Yeah, so let's go back and look at Sean Cheatham's stuff now. So hopefully you can understand. That's all he did. He just found the shape of the shadows, right? And then
Oh
he
yeah.
just painted a midtone in there, and then bam, it looks realistic. Okay? And the more I started
Yeah.
realizing this, because right now it's really easy to get distracted with the subtleties of the paintings and stuff that you're looking at. Right? You're like, wow, look at that. Look how masterful he painted that. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty great, but it's pretty simple. Oops. Okay. And then you go in here and you adjust the levels so that way you basically try to find only the shadow shapes. Right? So even though this is, you know, photoshopped a bit, right? You get it? Like it's even though it's a little bit
Yeah.
of like me messing with it, you can still feel the practicality of the image, right? You can still see the forms very clearly. But all I did is I pretty much removed a lot of the values and detail and just left it to almost just shapes, light shape and dark shape. So then you're asking me like, do I think about this? Do I think about the forms or all that stuff while I'm painting? Not really, right? I'm just painting. Um, but I put a lot of practice into understanding how to design the forms. Understand?
Mm-hmm.
And so like whenever I paint, like if you really watch me paint, right, like let me do like a robot head, something I do like often. Right? If you really watch me paint, I actually don't put in much lighting at all until like somewhere in the middle or even sometimes I do in the beginning, but really before I feel committed at all, what did I do? Like what's the first thing that I did?
Um, Finding the shape of the silhouette.
Yeah.
Or
And doesn't it already
yeah.
feel believable before I even put any kind of realistic lighting?
Yeah, actually my brain gets tricked and actually I think that that's late already.
Exactly. It's
even though
not.
like.
There's really no lighting. It's just pretty much. I mean, let me rephrase that. There is lighting, but it's like completely lit. Like there's lights from every direction, right? So we can see
Mhm.
every facet. So what am I focusing on? What is the number one thing that is making this so impressive? It's just shapes, right? You know how I had you guys do a lot of silhouette painting, and like that's part of your guys' thumbnailing process. And I mentioned before, it's not me teaching you guys like some basic leveling of drawing. No, I'm trying to teach you guys to see in shape because it's such a powerful tool to get a painting done quickly, right?
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and then I'll be like, oh, you know what? There's many ways I can go about lighting this. One is like I can just put it in, and once I do, I just say I know a bunch of simple rules, which is okay. If that's the shadow value for this thing, then I just got to maintain this value throughout everything that is that same material. That's another thing that people get distracted by is they add too many different values. And see, all I did now is what? The shapes of the what? The light and shadow,
Mhm.
right? That's it. That's the secret to painting like a boss. It's just mastering your shapes. And like I said, so how does one master then their shape? Well, that's where learning anatomy. That's what learning perspective, design in terms of like forms, right? That's where all that starts to come into play. Because once you know that, if you start to know that the arm is kind of like a chain link, right? Then you'll be able to draw that shadow shape more accurately. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see. So
Because
the lighting
you know the
persuasive.
difference.
So yeah,
Yeah, because you know
yeah.
what's actually going on. But if you don't know that, then you're going to do what I see commonly. Like even if you got the shape right, you're just going to trace the shape.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully that helps you out.
Yeah, totally, man.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, let me close some of this stuff. I feel like my machine is slowing down a bit. Any
I
other
don't think
questions?
I've ever seen you. I don't think I've ever seen you photo bash like in your painting streams.
Yeah, I don't. If I'm painting for myself, I generally don't. Not because I don't think photo bashing is a viable tool. That's obviously not true. There's so many people that do it and do an amazing job of it. Um, I just like to paint. I prefer just trying to get better and better at painting.
What about professionally? Do you try to avoid it?
Uh, it again, it depends if it all depends. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to. Like, I don't really care. Like, I don't care whether I am photo bashing or not. I only care if I'm having fun or not. If I'm doing professional work and it needs to be done really realistically in a short amount of time, then I absolutely will use photos um, because it just is faster. It just is. And there's no disputing that, you know? But if I have time or it's something that I do a lot of, then I don't really mind just painting it, you know? For me,
Mm-hmm.
it's like don't get distracted too much on photo bashing or not. Just focus on learning your fundamentals, and you could do that with photo bashing or just by painting. I think if you just paint, the advantage of why that's a better learning tool is because a lot of that you have to learn, right? And with photo bashing, not necessarily you won't learn it. It's just that a lot of it's given to you for free, and so sometimes you might miss a thing or two, and you might also be a victim of your tool or your process. That means like without photos, you have a hard time. But you know, a great example of people that don't like that's not true entirely. Like people who can just photo batch, but also have a really good sense of design. If you look like the stuff that John Park and those guys have been doing, like they've been really good about like knocking out like paintings very quickly, you know. And those are paintings, like they paint them, and they look and feel very realistic. And it's because, they do photo bash. And when you photo bash often, you have a good sense of what makes things look real and what doesn't.
Yeah, Craig Mullins is probably the best example.
Yeah, he's pretty good. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, who cares? But and more importantly, the most important thing you should ask yourself is, well, what kind of designer do you want to be? And for me, I just want to be a good designer. I want to make great images. And for a lot of what people like about my work is because I do paint it. Like I said, like that's usually the reason why people get pretty ecstatic, is because I do a lot of what I do um, by hand, you know, at least with Photoshop. Because Photoshop, if you really think about it, it's still a tool. It's still digital, right? And there's definitely a time where people thought digital art, and still some people think this way, that digital art is not real art, and it's clearly false. And that same mentality, I believe, is the same driving force that people get when they look at people who photo bash. They're like, oh, well, that's not real, whatever. I mean, when I was at Croatia, there was two talks. I didn't go to them, but I was talking to people that went to both talks, and one of them was like some student, and he was talking to me about it, and he was like, I'm really confused. And I'm like, why? What's up? He's like, well, I went to um, Marko Djurdjevic's talk. Marko Djurdjevic was basically like, if you don't draw, then don't talk to me. Like, you need to learn how to draw. You need to, like, drawing is so powerful and such a great tool. And if for anyone who does not draw, then, I don't see you uh, being any good, right? Pretty aggressive stance. And then he was like, oh, okay, great. Like, I get that, it makes sense. And then he said, then he went to another artist who he also has equally respect for, which is Shadi Safadi. And Shadi Safadi is like, if you don't use 3D and you don't use like photo bashing, then what are you doing? You're not gonna make it in this industry, right? And he was like, you got to use DAS 3D, which is like the most like opposite kind of statement that Marko Djurdjevic was making. And then he was asking me, he's like, so like, what the fuck? Like, I don't get it. I'm so confused. And I said, well, here's the reason why you're confused. Because they're both right, but they're also both absolutely wrong. you know? I was like, you could like just if you just took a second to think about it, like these are two of the most leading industry, and both of these guys own freelance companies too, right? Like they own like concept art freelance companies. Okay, and it's like so like they're clearly wrong because there's clearly an example of somebody or someone who does the thing in which they said that you can't do. you know, like Marco Djurdjevic is more traditional, and Stratis Savati is more like uh, new aged, right? And they're both right and they're both wrong. It's like you don't focus so much on whether you should do photo bashing or not. Just focus on making good artwork because that is the one thing that they both do right. Right? And that's why it's hard to dispute them because you look at their artwork and you're so impressed and you're so inspired by it, right? And it's like that's the
Right.
thing that you should take away from it. It's not so much those really extreme point of views because they're both wrong. It's just like even in the future when we have super advanced technology and we have like VR headsets that everybody could put on, like and just imagine something and it'll be created, right? Even with like technology at that level, right, which we are getting closer and closer to, there will still be a love for just like old school kind of training, like drawing, just like there's still being claymation movies being made, right? Maybe they will be on the mainstream, and maybe they're not going to be, widely popular or even make a lot of money. But if that's something that somebody loves to do, they will be able to make a living and do it. You know, it's fine.
Mhm.
Like if you're looking to get rich and make millions and millions of dollars, then maybe not. Maybe it's going to be a little more difficult. But I would argue millions and millions of dollars is not the road to happiness anyway. So really what it would be is just, are you happy with what you do? And so going back to kind of your question again, like, do I photo bash? Yeah, of course. Do I do 3D? Like all the time. But do I prefer painting over 3D or photo bashing? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But do I think it's the best? No. Yeah. I prefer painting because that's kind of where I put a lot of my time and effort into. You know, I had a teacher once tell me, his name was Mike Tracy. He told me that my artwork was very gimmicky, that I used too many tools. I was using like all these different photo brushes and you know, a lot of like tricks and doodads of Photoshop to get my painting. You know, using a lot of the filters. You know, it's clearly
Uh-huh.
like college or high school level art design, or you just use a lot of filters. You know, dark edges to make that shit look artistic. You know, and he said I used too much of that, and my artwork looked like a gimmick. And I was like, what? And then that really hit me hard, and I was like, well, you know what? Now I'm gonna start painting everything. And I started painting everything, and I'm glad I did because I really discovered that painting everything is actually the fastest way to get anything done. You know, the whole reason why a lot of people do photo bashing and all that stuff. Like I said, if it's like trying to get super, super realistic, then I definitely think photo bashing is still one of the greatest tools to do that. But if I have time, like I don't even need a lot of time. I just need like, and it doesn't have to be photorealistic. It just has to have imply photorealism. Then I'll paint it because I'll just paint it faster, right?
Right.
And because you know there's nothing faster. You know, like somebody's like asking like what tool should I use to draw better ellipses or straight lines? You know, I was like just draw straight lines and draw better ellipses because that's faster. If you don't have to pull out the ruler, because even traditionally, if you don't have to grab the ruler, put it down and measure, and then draw your straight line, if you could just draw the straight line like Scott Robertson, you know, that is the fastest way. You know, but is it the easiest? Hell no. That's why a lot of people use rulers, right? So I highly recommend you practice your fundamentals, but don't ever be distracted by, oh, well, should I do photo bashing or should I not? Because I think it's cheating. It's not cheating. It's just another way of making art. It's not even bad. It's just, again, another way of making good art. And there's people that are much better at it than others, right? And so just look at the ones that are really good at it, right? I remember I had a student too one time was like, you know, but I want to make sure, like I was like, he's like, should I learn 3D? Because I want to make sure I learn the fundamentals like you've always talked about. I was like, okay, look. He's like, yeah, I want to learn how to make good designs. I don't want to be distracted by 3D. Like, I don't know if I'll be able to learn it. I was like, look at Vitaly Bulgarov. Would you say that Vitaly Bulgarov has bad design sensibility? Would you look at this and with a straight face say, oh yeah, like he should have learned his fundamentals?
Nah, he's good to go.
He's fucking amazing, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't draw at all. He didn't do any drawings. Like I'm trying to say, like you don't need to learn fundamentals in 2D. 2D will is a little bit more difficult, like I said, and it'll give you more of kind of like a really hard hitting of stomach. But you know, lighting and like even though lighting and three-dimensional form is given to you in 3D modeling, right? But you don't get free design, and you don't get just because you have lighting and 3D doesn't mean it's going to be any good. You know, you've seen bad 3D art. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, the bear.
Yeah, the Cullen Bear, right? That's why I'm not going to show that again. I'm going to show you a different one. 3D model. Yeah, Cullen Bear. Dun, 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 dun. That was like 3D animation, but let's look at a 3D model. Uh, let's look for like a robot or a mech. Okay, yeah, here's some great examples. There's so many good examples of bad examples. I don't. For any artists that may have this type of work, I'm not dogging you. It's just you're not as good as Vitaly. You would also agree with that, whoever I decide to choose. Yeah. Hold on just a second. Because everybody's at different levels. Okay, this is pretty good. This is a good example. And that's not entirely because it's like a toy. Toys are allowed to be kind of garbage. I'm trying to find. Okay, yeah, this is perfect. This is a good one. Right. I mean, it's low poly, but still, right? You know,
Yeah,
this
I get
person
your point.
has,
And
yeah,
I'm
this
thinking,
person has 3D, and yet, you know, like this person was using 3D. Like, dude, 3D is cheating. Like, is it? Is it? You know, like you're telling me that if you go into 3D, you're gonna make stuff like this. Like the reason Vitaly Bogorov is an amazing artist is because he is using 3D. That's a part of it, but that's not the whole story. Not even close, right?
do you only know how awesome he is until you try
Yeah,
the actual box modeling?
yeah, 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 yeah. You're right.
That's when it gets real mind blowing.
Yeah, when you start to, so me and my wife were watching. Well, I was watching, and then she just happened to see that what I was watching. I was watching the League of Legends World Championships like a year ago, and she was laughing at me. She's like, "Why are you watching people playing video games?" Right? And I was like, "Well, this is really interesting. It's kind of like watching, you know, it's like why do people watch people playing basketball, right?" And she was just like, "Well, basketball is like a real sport. Like people actually are moving around and doing stuff." And I was like, "Well, what about golf or chess, right? Like golf or even baseball. Like baseball has like baseball, you really don't move a lot. Like whenever you do move, um, you're only running a short distance, you know? And you know, that's why like Babe Ruth was overweight and yet was a great baseball player. You know, you don't need to be athletic at some level, you know? And but people still love it. I said people still watch it. And she was just like, "Well, I don't like watching baseball. I think it's boring." And I was like, "Oh, that's fine. Like, you know, you're allowed to not like it." But yeah, at the same time, I was trying to explain to her is like the only reason why you don't think this is interesting is because you don't know what's going on, right? Like to you, you just see colors and flashing lights and just weird looking characters killing each other, right? Because that's what it is on the surface. But underneath the surface, like the kind of stuff that I know about the game, you know, I know a lot about the game and like the different characters and their abilities. I even know the players and how they're playing, you know, and like how why that move was well, so interesting and such a badass thing that that person just did, you know, because I've played the game, you know. And I said, and it made me realize too. I was like, the reason why people like to watch games like basketball or soccer or football or any kind of, or even like something as simple as running. Like, why would we like just watching people just run, like Usain Bolt just running really fast? We can all just like immediately be entranced in that, you know. It's because we all understand running, you know, and we understand that he is running really fast. You know, it's even more impressive to watch like mile runners because we understand that it's not only running really fast, it's running really fast for a long period of time. You know, like why do people watch NASCAR? Like people just driving. You know, it's because we understand that driving is we all have driven or been in a car before, and we also understand that they're driving really fast. You know, and so it's the understanding that I'm trying to make a point, like you just kind of made a point of that I want to kind of capitalize on. So sometimes people that don't do photo bashing or even try it an extensive amount of time, then they go right to the most predictable uh, response, which is, well, it's not good or it's not really creative or whatever, right? And I would say if anyone were to have any real criticism about something, maybe it'd be the other people who actually do the thing too. Okay. Not to say that an outsider has can't have criticism looking in, but that's all it is, just an opinion. Okay. And for someone who put more time and effort into investigating the problem, it becomes less of an opinion and becomes more of a theory, right? That's why I stopped watching movie critics because there have been movies where movie critics like, I hated this movie. And I'm like, oh, I guess the movie's bad. And then I watched it. And I was like, this movie's awesome. I love it. Like, what are they talking about? Right? Because I realize movie critics are really good at explaining and maybe talking about why they didn't like a movie. But if you were to ask them to make a movie, they don't know how to make a good movie, right? So I stopped
Yeah.
listening to movie critics, especially when I was getting into storytelling. And I started listening to other movie directors and actors and writers because these people are in the trenches. They're constantly doing it. If anyone knows what they're fucking doing, these people do, right? And like I said, their opinion isn't completely invalid like the movie critic, right? But my point is that a lot of times if you hear any kind of criticism that's a little bit backwards, you have to ask yourself, um, well, is that person proficient in it? Because maybe they're just being biased. Right? You know Maciej Kachara?
Yeah, he's Polish, just as me,
Yeah.
just like me.
So if Maciej Kachara was to say photo bashing is garbage, his opinion would be pretty valid. In fact, it would be probably less opinion, more theory, and you could probably explain why. Because guess who's like the master of photo bashing? He is, right?
Hmm.
So if he was to come out and talk about all the reasons why it's terrible, he would give us some real practical reasons for that, right? But he doesn't, because there is no, like, he doesn't feel that way. He feels like it's a great tool. He says it's just a tool. He paints, he photo bashes, he uses 3D, he uses all the tools necessary to create amazing imagery. And that's how I feel too. I feel, and most professionals actually feel this way. A lot of professionals who are at that level feel this way too. They don't feel like one tool is better than the other. It's usually students that have this kind of more kind of like predictable like response, you know? So, and I know it kind of derailed from like, you were just asking if but I just wanted to kind of make a bigger point about it. And yeah, of course, it just all depends. But for myself, what do I prefer the most? Painting. Painting is just, it's nirvana for me, right? It's something that I've just practiced for my whole career, something that I'm really good at, you know? And I just do it a lot and I just keep doing it, you know? And
Yeah.
you just got to do the same. Just figure out what you like to do. And like I said, I'm actually pretty good at photo bashing and I'm pretty good at 3D, you know? I'm not as good as the best in the industry, but I'm good enough. And I never was like, I shouldn't learn this. I was always like, what does it have to offer? You know, how can this improve my work? 3D specifically taught me a lot about seeing three dimensions. So I'm a big fan of teaching or telling people to learn 3D more than photo bashing because 3D puts you in the space of three dimensionality, right? And there's a lot of power there. Really, there is. Like being able to design three dimensionally is like huge.
It's got its pros and cons. I
E-
mean,
Everything does, right?
it does all the shading and perspective for you, but you have to worry about topology, UVs, and
Yeah,
all the other
more
stuff.
technical stuff. You're right. Exactly. Which is why I think it's making me a better art director because I'm art directing right now a lot of these 3D guys, and I know the constraints. You know, I'm not oblivious to it. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like I know what they're talking about because I've tried it myself. You know what I mean? I understand
Right.
exactly what they're talking about. And
I
so,
mean,
yeah, so my final point, and we're gonna move on. I'm gonna take another question. I'll take a couple more. My final point on this is that yeah, just don't be distracted because, like I said, there's gonna be like there's 3D scans that are coming now. Like you can start taking pictures on your phone and then make 3D printed stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's so many cool things coming into the future. To get caught up on tools is a distraction. Get caught up in fundamentals, learning theories like color, values, lighting, design, like understanding all of this stuff. You know, so that no matter what tool you use, you'll be able to replicate a good aesthetic regardless.
right.
All right. Someone had a question. Can you voice that question? Someone wrote something, I thought. So it'll be easier for me so I don't have to go back and read.
Yeah, okay. It was me. I just said that you're talking about critics not knowing to craft the actual subject they're critiquing, you know? And here in Brazil, it's common to hear that you don't have to be a chef to know that what food is garbage. What you think of that?
Yeah, like so to be very clear, I wasn't saying that if that's a great analogy by the way. What I was trying to say is like critics doesn't mean that critics don't know what they're talking about. I would rather just say I'd just rather listen to a chef tell me why food is garbage because they will do it more practically. Do you understand?
Yeah,
So
I
you're right.
completely
Like
agree.
I could go to a restaurant and be like, "Oh, this is fucking garbage," but I won't know why. And then, and so for me to be able to explain why is kind of pretentious, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Because you don't need,
Yeah,
you're in the same level as
I,
like some of the best critics is what I'm trying to get at, right? Like you just go to a restaurant and if you can just have, if you just have a good way of explaining why you didn't like something, then you could be a food critic. And I don't want to
yeah,
like I said, I don't want to say that being a food critic or being a critic is easy either. I'm just saying that where I stopped looking at these people's opinions when I was trying to learn more about how to do something well. Does it make sense? I started
yeah,
listening to the people who actually make the things because their insight is very, very powerful. I started listening to commentaries of movies, like movie directors talking over their movie and explaining their struggles and the things that they ran into. Like you hear a lot of really interesting things that a movie critic will have no clue about, right?
yeah,
And but at the same point, like why do so many critics hate a movie? That's something to pay attention to too, right?
yeah,
Why is the general consensus is that this movie is garbage? So even the director themselves, no matter what they explain, doesn't mean that they know what they're even talking about, right? So it's just you got to keep your eyes open and your ears very wide, right? So that way you can constantly try to keep and collect the best information. My wife just showed me this great video of Denzel Washington this morning where a reporter was like, what do you think about all this fake news? And, you know, like there's news that said that you changed your vote midway through and now you're a Trump supporter and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, am I now? Right. And he's like, you know, he's like, you know, if you read the paper, you're, uh, if you don't read the paper, you're missing or you're not informed. But if you read the paper, you're misinformed, right? He's like, that's the conundrum, you know, that
yeah,
we're dealing with right now. And he's like, and they're like, yeah. So what do you? He's like, what does that mean? Like, what do you think? He's like, look, he pointed at the reporter. He's like, it's your fault, you know, because all you reporters and news people are trying to just put out the news the fastest, regardless if it's true or not. You're not taking a second to criticize it, you know. And
yeah,
because of that, it's a big deal, and that's the problem. He's like, and if you, it's like just like everything in life, if you practice it a lot, right, you get good at it, and that includes bullshit. Right? And I
yeah,
was like, oh, snaps, you know? I think Michael Jordan made a very similar statement about that, which was uh, he was like, you know, you can shoot a million times, like you can shoot a basket like a million times, but if you don't correct your form, you just get really good at being very bad, right? And there's some truth to that. And I mentioned this before. It doesn't really matter. Like the worst thing you can do to improve is doing nothing, right? And like these two statements kind of counter that. Like, well, you can do nothing. Like, actually, isn't it worse if you do something wrong for a long time, right? Isn't that considered worse? Well, I believe that if eventually you'll come to your senses that you were doing something wrong for a long time, right? Versus not doing it at all. That's why it's important to take classes and listen to mentors and find people that you respect and try to understand their opinion, so that way you can get a large amount of data. Keyword is data, right? And you can start comparing the differences. Like that student that had the problem with the Marko Djurdjevic and Shadi Safadi, right? One person's like, be more traditional. Other person's like, fuck traditional, right? And they're both really great artists. And I said, so what's the common ground? They're both great artists. So they're both right, but they're also wrong. So focus on what you believe is right about what they're saying and what is wrong about what they're saying, you know, and make your own decision, right?
yeah,
Don't blindly trust them. You should also criticize and, you know, critique
yeah,
the things that I am saying to you, you know. But a lot of what I say, you know, is guided by things I've just experienced and seen in my own personal data. But I'm not always 100% right. But I'm definitely more right than I'm wrong, and it gives you a good format to start. And if I don't know something, I generally just say I don't know. I usually try not to bullshit people, you know.
yeah,
Like specifically, like when people ask me like working visas for overseas, like some people, a lot of you guys are not from America and you want to work for America companies, right? Or foreign companies. And you're like, well, how do you do that? Like sometimes that comes up in Q&As, and I say, I don't know. I've never had to deal with that ever. You know,
Yeah.
I live in
Yeah.
America. I live in California specifically, which is like the hot spot of the gaming and the film industry. You know, at least for now.
Yeah.
I have none of those problems. You know, and so I
Yeah.
say you should talk to Mache because he is a good example of someone who had to deal with those problems and has accomplished that. Or my friend Frank
Vitaly
Zane.
She also he's from like a little small village in the
Yeah. So
Russian.
yeah, so there's people, man, that are better to answer those questions, and I usually tell you to talk to those people if you can, or find someone that
Yeah.
can give you those answers. I cannot, at least for now, I can't.
Yeah.
Um, so like I always tell you guys, caution on the side of ignorance for that as well, so you don't give people misadvice. Like if you don't know, just don't pretend to know. You know, like if
No.
like
Yeah.
if you give somebody a criticism and you're just like, you know, but to be honest, like I'm not even good at that either. Like like you're asking me about anatomy and like from what I've heard, AJ has told me once, like you got to look at you got to study and you're going to practice this, look at different sources of anatomy reference, But personally, I haven't done that myself, so I don't know if it's the best route for you, so I'd say start there. That's a great way of giving advice to somebody because then you're giving them kind of like a heads up that you might not even know if that's the best route for that person right now. It's not a bad route because other people might have done it and they've accomplished great success, right? But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that person does. That's why I used to have my classes where I would give like more of like a structured curriculum, and I stopped doing that because I realized the majority of my students weren't improving. Huh?
Yeah. I get it.
Wait, hold on just a second. Um, which cereal? Oh, it's in the big container. I didn't hide it. It's in the where the rice is at. My wife was like, where'd you hide the cereal? Like maybe I was hiding it so they don't eat my cereal. Well,
Yeah.
it's for everybody.
But yeah, I agree completely with you. This week I saw a guy like rambling about that movie, the Arrival. What
Yeah,
the fuck, man?
yeah,
The movie is amazing.
yeah. I loved it. I thought it was great. My wife thought it was boring as fuck, and she's right too because it was slow. I was like, oh, instead of saying you're wrong, I was saying,
I
I was like,
I
well,
still
why do you feel that way, right? Because if
yeah
here's this advantage of being a little bit like when you hear a counter opinion or something that you don't agree with, instead of immediately reacting with like the way you're like, what? You take a step back and be like, wait, but why? Like, why does this person genuinely not think this movie's any good? You know,
yeah
not to say, not to try, like, not with the agenda to try to change their opinion, because who cares about that? Like, you don't really. It's not important to try to change people's opinions on stuff like
yeah
this. There's other opinions to try to change that are more worth your time, right? Like especially
yeah
around like politics and stuff like that. Um, but like but like a movie, like who cares if that person liked it or hated it? It's they're allowed to do that. But
yeah
as an artist, as a designer, you should ask yourself why, right? So that if you were to design, like let's say you were to make your own version of the movie, you have a way of thinking about it as well. Why did that person not like it? And what parts of their argument that I agreed with? So my wife was saying that it was like slow. It took forever to get to the action. And I was like, okay, that's a fair argument. It did take a while, right? It was a
yeah
little too cerebral. I can see that, you know.
yeah
So then, if I were to make my own version of the movie, then maybe I would consider that. I was like, well, maybe there's a better way to get to the point, you know, so that people in the audience you can reach a larger amount of people. You can still make the movie great, you know, but you don't
yeah
have to make it like boring. Like it doesn't like I don't think it taking it didn't it I agreed. It didn't have to take as long as it did to get to kind of the point of what was going on, right? And then maybe we could have more time to kind of sit around and contemplate. And then you could probably have had you could have probably spun it a little longer, right? Because there's another movie that kind of has like a twist, right? Like The Sixth Sense is a great example, right? where
Yeah.
the whole movie is so intriguing and interesting, and then it had that great twist at the end of the film. And so I was like, okay, well, The Sixth Sense is a good example of a movie that I think most people loved, like my wife included, right? That maybe the director and writers of Arrival could have took a lesson out of, because maybe they had that kind of cool, interesting idea and twist at the end, but they were dragging it along because they had to make a 2 hour long movie. You know, like it might have been better as a short film, like an hour long or half an hour long, or it could have been like an episode out of a Black Mirror. You know, it might
Yeah.
have been better there, and most people would have like loved it more, right?
Yeah.
If it was like more like a Twilight Zone episode versus like a whole full length movie, right? And that's what I thought. I was like, that's my criticism. Like if I was to make this movie, if I was to redirect it, you know, maybe that's the correction that I would say. So maybe it doesn't belong as a film. This is why George R. R. Martin was like, I don't want Game of Thrones to ever be a movie because they're gonna botch it. There's more to the film, or there's more to the story than just like a 2 hour film, or even a 3 hour film, or even a saga like a Lord of the Rings type of thing, right? And so then when the producers came to him and was like, no, you're right, it should be a TV show, right? Like a
Right.
TV series. That was like one of the greatest decisions that they ever made. Because look at it now, it's a huge hit. Right? So the person's not wrong. Like there's a reason why they didn't like it. And as a designer, you have to consider that. Like what me and my wife, for instance, we watched the movie Twilight together, the first one, and we hated it.
Yeah.
We hated it. We both hated it. And I was thinking, well, like my wife is like, okay, so the demographic is definitely female, but my wife is a female, okay, and she hated it, okay. And I was like, well, but she's in her 30s, and so was I. Like I was like in my late 20s. It's like maybe it's because she's just like it's not made for her. It's made for a much younger audience, and that's true. It was made for like teenagers, like teenage girls, right?
Yeah.
And that's why that film is good. That's why Edward is covered in diamonds as his weakness. He's basically a walking, talking engagement ring, right? Like it's a very
Yeah.
terrible message to send to our little girls, sure, right? But so is
Yeah.
Fast and the Furious to teenage boys. That if you want to succeed, you got to be either muscular or have fast driving cars. We have our poison too. You know what I mean? And for it's easy to be like, oh, Twilight, what a piece of shit. No, no, no. We have ours too. You know, and you might not think you do. You thought, oh, I only watch the greatest and best films. No, no. I bet you have your terrible movies that. Well, that's my guilty pleasure, right? No, that movie's terrible, and you only say it's a guilty pleasure because you feel guilty about it. It's funny whenever I have debates with some of my colleagues, and they're like, like, why do you love Transformers so much? It's such cinema garbage. And I'm like, it's not, dude. It's fucking a kids film, and I loved Transformers when I was growing up, and this is what I've always wanted to happen, like a live action Transformers. It's like, do I think they've gone overboard? Yeah, I think they're getting a little crazy now, but that's just a product of something that just it keeps being made over and over and over again. They keep running out of ideas, right? But the first film, the first Transformers that came out, man, I love it. I thought it was one of the greatest things ever, dude. I was so happy with it, you know? And
Yeah.
I feel like people are just jumping onto this bandwagon of hating Michael Bay, but they didn't feel that way when he made Bad Boys or The Rock, right? Some of my favorite action movies ever. And so it just
Yeah.
comes. It's just like I was saying, like try not to be a critic, try to be an analysis. Like try to think about it. Like think about why. Like you're allowed to hate movies too. You're allowed to hate like someone else's opinion about a movie or even a movie itself. But ask yourself why. Why do you actually hate it? And what do you think the director could have done differently, constructively, right? And then also admit to yourself, right, that you're not a movie director and maybe you don't understand the parameters or the restraints or behind the scenes what caused it. Because I can tell you right now, executives aren't sitting in a room thinking, how do we make the most god awful movie that makes no money?
Yeah.
You know, they don't
I
want to
totally agree.
not make money. They definitely want to make money, and good movies make money. So they don't want to make bad movies, right?
Yeah.
It's just a lot of things happen, and then bad movies just get made, right? And so it's the same way like the health industry is. It's not like the food and health industries are sitting there. It's not like Coca-Cola sitting there thinking, how do we make young children obese and die at early ages and get diabetes when they're in their early teens? How do we get them to die early? You know? No, they're just saying, how do we make more money? Right?
Yeah.
Like these industries aren't that evil, but they have thousands of employees. Um, they have lots and lots of money and a lot of capital and investors that they have to speak to, and sometimes they make very terrible decisions, not because they're terrible people, right? And I think a lot of times people forget that. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely people out there that make terrible decisions because they are terrible people. Right? I'm not saying that those people don't exist. I'm just saying, uh, reconsider the circumstances.
The
You'll be a little more
the
educated, right? And I think a lot of critics
the
don't do that. That's all.
yeah, no, the money motivation is a lot bigger than the evil inside
Yeah,
their
yeah.
hearts.
Yeah, when people start making tons of money, um, the scope of perspective, like, the perspective of things changes. Uh,
Yeah.
and not all people can be like Bill Gates, who decide like I've made so much goddamn money, like maybe I should do some good in this world, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody is like that. More and more people
No.
are like that because Bill Gates created a foundation that's literally built for billionaires to become philanthropists. You know,
Yeah.
like he designed and created a platform for that because he's like, hey, yeah, we're so filthy rich, like why don't we spread the wealth a little bit, you know? And people are like, yeah, that's not such a bad idea. Like you're right, I don't need all this money. And he's inspiring billionaires and millionaires to do this. You understand? Including getting like people like Mark Zuckerberg, who's like a multi-billionaire, to basically 99% of all of his money is going to uh, charities and to change the world, right? 99% of all of his income, because he's like, I don't need $1 billion, right? And that's
Yeah.
great. That's great to hear. However you feel about Facebook, I know some people are like, friggin'. It's ironic when I see social justice warriors on Facebook talking about Facebook and the evil of it, and at the same time posting on Facebook.
Exactly.
Like, it's like
Yeah.
you
You're
love the
on Facebook.
platform, but you're hating it. It's like, come on, like if you don't like it, then don't use it. I remember I had a long argument with somebody about because they're like, yeah, every time I try to watch YouTube videos, like it's always just like stupid videos that I don't want to watch. Like it's always like, and I'm like, dude, you know that YouTube's algorithm is based off of things that you click on. So yes, it is actually things you want to watch. Like that is not a good excuse because they're trying to use it as an excuse of why they get distracted. And it's like literally whatever you click on, YouTube pays attention to. So if you don't want to watch, you know, uh, cats wrestling dogs, then stop clicking the cat wrestling dog videos. Yeah. Like I don't have that stuff. My feed is mostly like science and games and like game theory and science theory, right?
Yeah.
Like go to your YouTube right now and you'll see it be wildly different than mine. TED Talks, um, a lot of TED Talks, health videos, workout videos, one movie critic, late night shows, more nutritional stuff. I love College Humor, Daily Show, some politics. Conan O'Brien, I'm a big fan of him. I love what you call it, uh, Overwatch. A lot of Moana videos recently because we and the kids watched it and my kids love the music, so I was playing it for them. Right? So now go to your YouTube and see if it compares to mine, right? And you'll see right
Yeah.
away like what I'm talking about. Like YouTube is catering to you. Facebook is catering to you. Google is catering to you. So if you don't want advertisements and shitty things constantly posting up on your feeds, then stop looking at shitty things. Okay? Like you're in
Yeah.
control of what they show you. They're not in control. Like there's not like a person at Facebook that's like, I'm gonna Anthony Jones, I'm going to make him believe in the Illuminati and the flat world theory. I'm not watching those videos because I don't fucking care about that stuff. You know, it's really that simple. And I think if you start to do that, then it's like when you surround yourself with good company, then you become a good person, right? So if you surround yourself with good information, then you're going to be well educated. You understand? And so that's my advice to you guys in terms of like watching. That's why I said I stopped watching. I used to watch tons of movie critic stuff because I thought it was so interesting, and it is definitely entertaining. But I stopped. I definitely died it down a bit. And I was like, you know what? I really don't care. In fact, that Rogue One video of the Jeremy Johns guy, I like his way of explaining why he likes movies. I actually stopped. I didn't watch it because I haven't watched the movie yet. Right? I'm gonna go watch the movie, and then I'm gonna watch his video and see what he thought about it and see if it aligns. Right? I don't want to have any preconceived notion of how I should feel about the movie.
Yeah.
And so, as designers, I think that's really important to become better designers is to constantly be objective. What does that mean? It means that you're allowed to hate a movie. You're allowed to sit there and talk about why you think a movie is terrible, but at the same time, ask yourself why do so many other people love it, and that will make you such a better designer overall. Because if you ever get hired to work on Twilight 17 or whatever, or the Twilight remake, you'll know what to do. Diamond skin, here we go.
Yeah.
You
No.
know what I mean?
I, I, I'm the kind of guy that likes everything. You know. I don't really.
Oh, okay. So
Uh,
liking everything
yeah.
is pretty good too, and you have to ask yourself why you like everything, and then why other people don't like the things.
Yeah, no, I think that, you gotta respect the work. You know, many people were involved, working and passionate about it, and also the people that actually loves that, Twilight. These guys are putting years of their lives to something that they like, as I also put years of my life to stuff I like.
Yeah,
So we gotta respect everything and everyone,
yeah.
and that's
Respect.
my
That's a good
actually.
word. I agree with that word, respect, because it means that you can disagree with them,
Yeah.
but you're listening to them. I agree. That's a good word.
Exactly.
All right. One last question, and I'm gonna send you guys out into the world. Anyone have any other questions about anything? Please voice your question now.
I have a more practical question.
Yeah, go for it, man.
What kind of exercise do you recommend to improve my value?
Uh, Painting and values, but specifically separating your values both in local value and also in forms. Like understanding like local value, kind of like how I did that robot drawing earlier where I wasn't really lighting it. Remember that? It was just local
Yeah.
value. I was just like light and dark shapes and forms. I'm sorry, light and dark shapes and materials, not forms. Okay? And then also painting forms like cubes, cylinders, right? A good exercise for this is like cast paintings or cast studies, right? Like something like this, where you look at like a statue that's pretty much has no material or anything to it, and you just paint the shadow shapes. This is a great exercise to practice your form painting, okay? And then you just combine the two, and then you start to really master your values. Okay, it's about recognizing that light and dark values are pretty similar, meaning light value, anything that's in the light will generally have the same value elsewhere. Okay? So like sometimes I'll see students will light the forehead much, much brighter. Or I'm sorry, the forehead will have a bright value, but then they'll paint like the beard much, much brighter, right? Or vice versa, you'll have the highlight on the head really bright, but then the the beard is too dark. Okay? And there's a really good example of this. It's the checkerboard illusion. So this checkerboard illusion, have you seen it before? Doesn't matter. For those of you who haven't, I'll explain what this is about. So which is brighter in value? The actual value. Which is brighter? A or B?
Um, about the same?
They are the same.
This seems to be lighter, but
But
it's the
it's a
same.
trick question. Exactly. And here's the
Yeah, so
thing.
it's because they are surrounded by, and you know your
You
brain
know,
know it's
yeah,
in
you know
shadow.
it's supposed to be light because it's following that pattern, and you know it's in shadow. But even though it's in shadow, and even though that I've explained to you, and we kind of know consciously that they're going to be the same, right? But if you even though consciously you know that, B does look brighter, doesn't it? It
Yeah,
just
sure.
does. But the reality is that it isn't, right? And once I do that, then the illusion gets destroyed, right? Now there's no confusion, you know? But here's the funny thing. When I remove it, guess what our brain does? It makes it bright again, right? And so this is the problem that I'm talking about. So whenever I see people painting, they'll paint something that is supposedly lighter because it's like a lighter local value and make it too much lighter because their brain is convinced it should be brighter. Does it make sense? But the
Yeah,
reality
sure.
says otherwise. And you got to practice this by doing local values and then also practice lighting technique, like forms, right? And then putting those two together and seeing a pattern and developing a process that helps you avoid that. Okay? So for instance, I know that so that I made this light value right here for this material pretty much the same right over here. You see how there's no difference, right?
Right?
It's because I know better. But what I would see a student do would be like, well, you know, like even if this is in shadow, like let's say I put this in shadow, let's say like for whatever reason like this casts a shadow onto that, right?
Right.
They'll still be like, no, but that should be brighter because it's brighter, local value, and that is wrong. No, it should be in shadow. Like this is correct. It's already accurate when you put the shadow over it, you know. And staying consistent to that just takes practice. Takes a lot of practice because it's like you're really fighting against your brain at it. So you need to create systems and mentality for your brain to kind of like to listen to, you know.
Yeah, okay. It's a
And
matter of practice,
yeah,
basically.
to really kind of
To
get past it. And don't worry, and I'll yeah, don't worry if it becomes an issue in your paintings, I'll definitely point it out to you.
no, it's not really an issue, but I've not no really issue with light or value, but I know I can, you know, get better,
Yeah,
obviously.
so it's doing the boring stuff because nobody does the boring stuff like sit there and paint cubes, rectangles. You know, they always want to be painting like epic monsters and mechs, right? No, I did a lot of paintings of just basic stuff for quite a while. Specifically, excuse me, specifically in the early parts of my career. I hope that helps. All right, guys, I'm gonna call it quits right now. Thank you guys for doing such great work, great questions, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Don't be strangers to one another. You know, keep practicing, practice together, talk to one another. Helps out a lot. And with that being said, peace out, y'all. Have a good one. See you guys Tuesday.
Right. Bye.
Yeah.
Peace out. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to watch more in the future. If you liked the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you like this content, you can go to my website, robotpencil.net, where you can find mentorships, tutorials, and a Patreon to get more exclusive content. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next videos.